This is a brown turkey fig. It's magnificent, isn't it? It's growing on an east-facing wall, really handsome foliage, and produces a lovely flush of fruit, sort of July time. Thing is, you notice that it's still covered in these little embryonic figs, but back end of the year they're not going to come to anything. They just haven't got time to ripen. So my job to improve the fruiting is to go round and snip all of these off, adios them. And that way, that will divert energy into next year's crop of figs. And hopefully, because the plant hasn't wasted its efforts on producing these things or holding them through the winter, it will get a wriggle on with a second crop and we'll get 2 crops per year, which is perfectly possible in this part of Devon. You often see advice about leaving and protecting figs like this over winter, but the fact is they're too big. What will happen is the skins will get quite corky, and as the sap flow rises in the spring, the skins just won't swell. All that will happen is they'll just pop off anyway, so you might as well adios them now. The figs you want to keep are the embryonic ones like this, right just inside the leaf axils. Try and find an even better example. Yeah, next year's figs. There they are. Just in there. Little wee things like that. About the size of your little nail ideally. Anything bigger than that, well, it's got to go. The other thing to notice on this plant, and this is a bit of a pruning trick, is that it's come away from the wall by quite a long way. You come around here, you can really get an idea of that. So I've mulched down here because I want to use the ground. It's good east facing wall. This would be ideal for, well, it would be great for me. It'd be Japanese ginger. But of course the fig is shading the soil, so I want to get it up or at least back tight to the brickwork. Now this is going to have to be done in sections because I don't want to lose the whole crop, because there's 2 types of wood on this. There's the tips that you can see are carrying the fruit. There's more for next year right there. These little tiddlers. The leaves are all just falling away, it's that time of year. And then that joins on to long straight stems that run right back to the crown of the plant. They're completely unproductive. In fact, they don't even have any leaves on them. So what I want to do is tie some of them back to the brickwork, get it nice and tight. As you can see, I've got some good old vine eyes and strong supports in there, so that'll be ideal. And then I'm going to prune the rest off, certainly from these bits that are coming really far forward. I mean, when I drive in here, it's scraping the paintwork. Anyway, so adios in them. Now you might think this is pretty harsh. Well, it is. But here's the thing. All these lumps and bumps down the stems, these little scars, have what are called adventitious buds in them. And these are buds that are sitting just below the bark. And because I've pruned the plant, that'll activate these buds, and next year they'll start to grow. Now they won't produce fruit because they need a year just to produce a long stem and then get the fruit on the top. So yeah, here is a growth from this year that's just sprung up. You can sort of see how long it is. No chance of fruit this year, but there we go. A little bud in there. That is an embryonic fig, and that will fruit for us next year. Right, so this, take note, is the before. I'll show you the after later. But one other thing, these new shoots from this year, i.e. the ones that don't have any embryonic figs, are brilliant cutting material. Snip them off the plant, cut them just below a bud. Actually, I'm going to go a bit shorter. Adios the leaves. Like that. I don't mind that little tiddle left on the top, although probably it will die off. And I'll stick that in a pot, perhaps right up, so it's only its shoulders and head are sticking out of the compost. An old rose pot is ideal, and that will root and be a new plant for free for next year. I'll gather a load of them and I'll show you what it's all about in my greenhouse at home. Back at home at my greenhouse, just as the rain comes in. Yeah, for fig cuttings, yeah, this is the type of pot you want. It's called a long tom or rose pot, nice and deep. ordinary composting net. You really don't need anything too special for figs. If you've got a bit of grit, always add that in, won't do any harm, help with the drainage. But this is quite open and you can sort of see quite lumpy and bumpy, this peat free anyway, so they should be fine. All I'm going to do is trim them just below a bud. See, in the buds there's what's known as meristematic tissue. These are the cells that can divide and turn into anything. So could be a leaf, could be a stem, but if they find themselves buried, they turn into roots. I'm going to stick them in around the outside of the pot. Next one, just below a bud. And the reason they go around the outside of the pot is that there's a better balance between the moisture of the compost and the air around the sides of the plastic, and that makes it more likely that the plants will root. It's just one of those things. Cuttings on the outside of the pot always do that a little bit better. There are 5 of them in there like that. A bit of water and these should be rooted and then ready to plant out again in the spring. Easy as that. So the first thing is to get all this stuff that's sticking out from the wall back to the wall, and that's the job for a pruning saw. Now, because the sap on this fig, or any fig, is quite gummy, I don't like it on my skin, so getting the old gloves on. So the name of the game is to get rid of all this low stuff so I can see the main branches against the wall, and then over time train them into swells and ornamental shapes. We're perhaps a couple of seasons away from that, but by adiosing this stuff that comes forward, so I've been chopping out a few bits here, it's going to open up the whole plant and make it so much easier to deal with. It's a bit of a puzzle working out what needs to go, but actually once I get going with the pruning proper, it'll all come into place. It'll be a bit more obvious what needs to be done. There's a chunky one. Let's have him. So what I do is I cut a little bit away from the stem. That just gets the weight out, and then I go back a little bit tighter. And the reason I do that is the weight of the branch can snap the whole thing out, cause the tree to split, or certainly strip the bark as the unwanted branch falls away. So what I've done is I've chopped out loads of the wood that's going forward, and then I'm training in some of the younger, more vital bits into the gaps along the wall. Just dragging those in there like that. You see? Right. And then when they're on the wall, all the side shoots, and these are the little shoots that'll have next year's figs on them, I'm pinning them back onto the brickwork, spinning them round to keep them nice and tight and create a kind of circular witchwood, a sculpture, if you will, of all the stems. Now, the thing is, some of the wood's crossing and I don't like that, but that's something that'll have to be addressed over years, because if I go too hard on this, there won't be any fruit on it next summer. So what I'm doing is I'm leaving some of the crossing bits, but what I shall do in time is replace old ones like this. You see how the scars on there? That's where it's been tied with baler twine. I always use this stuff, soft twine, because it rots away before it scars the bark on the fig. But yeah, I'll adios that, replacing some new growth from next year, and eventually this will be a much tidier and more ornamental fig, full of swirls and full of fruit. Yeah, I'm just going to keep tying these back in and take out a bit of the height as well. You see the fig's right at the top. You don't really want to use a tall ladder to pick your fruit. I mean, having a set of steps is fine, but I don't want to be waving around at altitude every time I want to have a fig on me toast. No, no, no. So yeah, but right now, look at that sky. Enough's enough. I'll come back to this tomorrow.